fantastic. I'm really delighted that I didn't think anybody could find this place. So what I'm going to talk about today are healthy seas. And let's think about this. Let's just think about what healthy seas could do for us. What if I showed you how investing in the ocean could improve human health on land as well as near the sea, improve seafood safety for human consumption, increase algal farming yield, increase biodiversity and ecosystem stability? I'm really hoping you'd really want to invest in that you'd think that would be great, especially if we could use the natural capital that we find in our ecosystems, the ecosystem services. And this is a paper we published a couple of months ago showing that seagrass ecosystems reduce exposure to bacterial pathogens of humans, fishes, and invertebrates. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that story, about how the oceans improve human and environmental health. First, I'm going to have to tell you the slightly bad news. This is my world where under warming conditions, diseases are on the rise, whether it's our living ocean biota or whether it's humans on land. A warmer world, in fact, ends up often being a sicker world. But the good news that I'm going to talk about is that coastal seagrasses decrease pathogenic bacteria from human sewage by 50%. Doesn't cost us anything. It's a natural ecosystem service. Furthermore, coastal seagrass beds can also improve biodiversity by decreasing diseases of foundation coral species. So again, welcome to my world. One of the things we've been doing over the last couple of decades is just trying to stem a rising tide of ocean disease outbreaks, and we're getting really tired of just monitoring and studying death and destruction. We're very interested to try to find better ways forward to produce healthier ecosystems, whether it's of lobster, fish, corals, or marine mammals. So I lead a group that studies was studying health of coral reefs on Barang Lompo Island in Indonesia. And this is what that island looks like. So we went to this island in Sulawesi because it's the center of coral and actually all of marine biodiversity, so very biodiverse ecosystems, and also intense human use of those ecosystems. And you know, when you look at this, it kind of looks like a tropical paradise. There's a very lovely village, nearby beaches, vibrant coral reefs. When you get a little bit closer, though, the story's a little bit different. Although Indonesia is the heart of marine biodiversity, human health and environmental health are linked. And what happened to us is we got sick while leading this workshop on this sort of remote tropical island. All of us. I led an international team there. We had to send our Australian scientist home because she had typhoid and it took her 2 months to recover from that. The rest of us got amoebic dysentery. And I thought, you know, this is ironic that the coral health team or coral disease team also all got sick. And it kind of really sort of stuck the thought in my mind that, wow, human health and environmental health are linked. And so we said, well, geez, we got to find out what's in this water. Not only for the corals, but also for people. And so this comes from that paper that we published, and it's a list of the sequence using the DNA sequences of all of the bacteria that are in that water. And in addition to quite a few fish and invertebrate pathogens, bacteria that make those animals sick, the things with the arrows are stuff that makes humans sick. So Clostridium, Enterococcus, Shigella, and Streptococcus, among other things. And so that water is kind of dangerous. So it's no wonder we got sick. But here's the interesting thing. If you take and measure Enterococcus bacteria, and this is the standard EPA standard for how we decide if our water is safe to swim in. If it has a certain level of Enterococcus, it's not safe, and I can tell you right now, the one on the left is not safe. The bottom one on the right's not even safe. What we found is that places where there was no seagrass had much higher titers of these Enterococcus bacteria than places where we had seagrass meadows. And so as part of a project that we were doing to study ecosystem services, we said, hey, what if we measure the filtration service of our seagrass beds? And so what you see here is the mean enterococcus levels along a gradient there from the shore. It's really high right near the shore. It's very dangerous there. As you get out to the seagrass bed, you can see that green line's dropping much faster. So that's that filtration service of the seagrass bed, diminishing the enterococcus bacteria, and even lower as you get out to the reef. So this was kind of the essential quantification of this service. So we were really pleased that it was so dramatic, over a 50% reduction. And my postdoc, Jolie Lamb, then went on to do, with a colleague, the complete bacterial sequencing of all of the bacteria that were on this. And then again, I just want to show you some of the data. Again, you can see on the left that those are the 4 islands. This is well replicated, 4 different islands, complete gradients run, thousands of samples done, where seagrasses are absent and seagrasses are present. Again, on the seagrasses present, you can see a huge drop as you get into that seagrass bed. And then it's sort of really interesting. As scientists, we kind of do like to look at this. You can see all the individual bacteria and how those change in the different environments. So again, if you look at the right panels, you can see very dark blue at the shore. That's where all the, for example, the first one's Shewanella bacterium, and then it diminishes very sharply in the seagrass flat, and then even more out to the reef. So this is the good science that's needed to support our hypothesis that seagrass beds can essentially filter or diminish bacteria in the water. Not just bacteria, also diseases of corals are lower near seagrass beds. So this is the evidence that there's also a boon to the environment of living in or near a seagrass bed. So these are diseases of corals, and you can see the black bars are the levels of coral disease, the percentage of corals that have black band or white syndrome. The first 2 are the big difference there. Outside seagrass beds and inside seagrass beds, it's more than a half diminish. So of course, the $1,000,000 question is, what's a seagrass bed doing? And that's not something that we were set up to study in this particular study, but it's something that we're moving on towards trying to understand. There's probably 3 different mechanisms for how a seagrass bed is diminishing levels of bacteria, but I just want to talk about one, because in a way it's the most obvious. Because the other thing about seagrass beds are that they provide habitat. There's other things that live in the seagrass bed. Things like bivalves, like on this picture here. Both of these aquaria contain 400,000 algal cells. However, the aquarium on the right is stocked with 24 marine clams. And over the course of about an hour, you're going to see a big change, if I can get this to work. There it goes. The clock is ticking. Watch the one on the right. You're going to see it's a very simple demonstration, but this is how natural filtration works in our ocean ecosystems. So we think that one of the mechanisms in the seagrass beds is that there are clams and sponges and other organisms that are just basically sucking the bacteria out of the water. The oxygenation is also very important that seagrass provide. So that's international work. We're also working domestically. This is actually the largest seagrass bed in the continental U.S. This is one of our study sites in the Pacific Northwest in Washington State. And we're going to be studying some of the processes of natural filtration in these kinds of beds. But we're also studying this problem. There are things that seagrass beds can't filter out. So this is actually a disease of the seagrass bed, and we're interested in finding ways to diminish this problem that's kind of eating away at our natural frontiers. So just to sum up, why does seagrass hygiene matter? We've talked about safer recreation and healthier people, and I think the costs, if you consider the costs of some of the diseases that people are getting from poor hygiene, it's not just in countries like Indonesia. For example, in Seattle just this spring, there were enormous overflows of the septic system. Similarly, in communities we work in Hawaii, same thing. There's always overflows of the septic systems, and that's a vital role that our natural ecosystems can play in cleaning the water. Safer seafood, greater biodiversity, and then one of the projects that we haven't published yet, but we have data on, is that diseases of cultured algae are also lower in seagrass beds. So the reason I like to emphasize this, and I think we can call it new optimism for seagrass ecosystem services, is this hasn't actually, although we've known for many, many years that coastal wetlands can pull nutrients out of the water and do a lot of cleaning up of toxic substances, the actual role in human health has not been investigated. And I'm hoping that this will provide more incentives, more natural capital benefits for preserving these ecosystems. And of course, we can add this to the long list of ecosystem services that we already know about and in fact was already mentioned in terms of the blue carbon sink. And then just sort of one positive example of uptake, Puget Sound's vital signs. You can't see them all, but there's one there that talks about eelgrass, and the goal is to increase eelgrass beds by 20%. So that's my hope. These kinds of studies can lead to that sort of uptake. I want to thank my collaborators. A lot of the work was done actually by Jolie Lamb, our postdoc, who was funded by the Nature Conservancy as well as our Atkinson Center, and another postdoc. Oh, I think we're almost done. And the only other thing I want to make is a brief commercial break, which is that not only do I study diseases, but I'm also interested in how ocean biodiversity make people happy and the intersection of art and nature. So I have a book out this year that I'll talk about in the author group tomorrow, and we have a film that's being shown tomorrow night. So I'm happy if there's time for a question. One quick question, I think. Yeah.
How easy is it to reestablish seagrass beds in places that may have lost it?
Well, there are a lot of extensive seagrass restoration efforts. My plug would be, let's just try really hard to not lose them, because it's a whole lot easier to not lose them. But there's actually very good technology for reestablishing seagrass beds. And again, I think if we had better financing of it, we could really do quite a job to put some back. Thanks for that question. And thank you all very much.